Hello guys, welcome back. Today we have an interesting story for you. In this episode of my podcast, I talk about a cyber attack on one of the biggest film studio in the world. Yes, you might have guessed that right. We are going to talk about what happened with Sony Pictures just before Thanksgiving in the year 2014. This cyber attack had great implications. It crippled one of the biggest film company, it embarrassed the executives, and it reshaped Hollywood. So let's start our podcast on the Sony Pictures Hack of 2014. So there are many theories floating around on who hacked Sony Pictures. In this podcast, I am going to tell you the FBI version of the story. So according to FBI, it all started when Sony Pictures produced a movie called The Interview. Now this movie was about how two journalists who get a chance to interview the North Korean premier Kim Jong-un, and how CIA comes up with a plan and partners with these two journalists to kill the North Korean premier. And the worst thing was, it portrayed all this in a very comical yet disturbing fashion. Now this was very seriously objected by North Korea. They complained for months against this film. They even sent a letter to the United Nations urging them to stop the release. But these steps didn't help. Now they started threatening Sony Pictures. And frankly, Sony Pictures were a bit worried. But some of the investigators also believe Sony underestimated these threats and never imagined how bad this would turn out to be. A few weeks later, on November 24th, 2014, on a normal Monday, when employees tried logging into Sony's network, the screen greeted them with the sound of gunfire, scrolling threats, and the menacing image of a fiery skeleton looming over the tiny zombified heads of the studio's two top executives. This was the moment when Sony Pictures came to know they have become victim to one of the worst and crushing cyber attacks that had ever happened. Before even Sony's IT staff could pull the plug, the hackers' malware had leaped from machine to machine throughout the lot and across continents, wiping out half of Sony's global network. To give you some real numbers, out of the 6,797 personal computers, it erased everything stored on 3,262 of them. Out of 1,555 servers, which had enormous amount of data, it deleted 837 of them. Also, to make sure nothing could be recovered, the attackers had even added a little extra poison, a special deleting algorithm that overwrote the data in 7 different ways. Hang on, it's not over yet. When that was done, the code zapped each computer's startup software, rendering the machines brain dead. Now that's what you call a real bloodshed. And that was only the beginning of Sony's horror story. Before destroying the company's data, the hackers had also stolen it. So over the course of next 3 weeks, they dumped 9 batches of confidential files onto public file sharing sites. And this would range everything from unfinished movie scripts, emails, salary list, more than 47,000 social security numbers, and 5 Sony films, 4 of them which were unreleased. All these were leaked into piracy websites for free viewing. The implications of these leaks were enormous. As I said, the leaked data included email conversations between top Sony Pictures executives. I'll give you some examples of what these emails contained. Some of them showed how Sony employees are fed up with the boring and unimaginative movies. Some showed how Sony had failed to deliver on its Spider-Man franchise. One of them spoke about how they are saddled with mundane and boring Adam Sandler films. One executive even called Angelina Jolie a minimally talented spoiled brat. You can imagine how these leaks would have spoiled the relationship between Sony Pictures and the top Hollywood stars. There were 5 movies that the hackers stole and posted for free in public domain. Every stolen copy of a movie is potentially a movie to get lost. Fury, the World War II drama starring Brad Pitt, was downloaded illegally 2.3 million times. Just imagine how much they would have lost in revenue. With the leak of salary slips, the world now knew what each Sony employee made. This also led to gender inequality criticisms, as the leaks found Sony had a problem with hiring women in high-ranking positions. To top it all, hackers exposed enough personal data that 3,800 employees must now be on guard for identity theft. Hackers took more than 100 terabytes of data, a leak of information so huge that cybersecurity analysts think it took Sony a year or more to go through it all and deal with the damage. Then the hackers threatened a 9/11 style attack against theaters, prompting Sony to abandon the interview's Christmas release. Although after public uproar and a bit of pressure from the government, they released it in a limited capacity. So from the moment the malware was launched to months after the hackers first broke in, it took just 1 hour to throw Sony Pictures back into the era of Betamax. The studio was reduced to using fax machines, communicating through post-it messages, and paying its 7,000 employees with paper checks. This was FBI version of the story. There are other theories too. Some say Ukrainian criminals were behind the attack. Some say Russia was behind the attack, and some others. To conclude, I would say maybe this case was a unique one, or maybe it's a harbinger of things to come, of the messy world that results when show business, the internet, and foreign policy collide. But I think this is a great lesson to all on how in a single week the hackers brought a major Hollywood studio down to its knees. This also raises a few important questions. The main being, are big corporates and multinationals prepared for such kind of attacks? What's the future for movies with a politically risky subject? Does this hack prove cyber attacks do threaten freedom of speech? And finally, how prepared are we to fight against state-sponsored cyber attacks? I will leave you with a quote from Andrea Machwin, and I think this is an appropriate one for this episode. The quote says, "The reality of the current digital age is that intangible assets matter at a whole new level." Thank you.